All right, we're coming to you this week from Florida. We are at new studios, and we'll be speaking to Nick Hulscher, who we've spoken to before. He's epidemiologist, also administrator at the McCullough Foundation. He continues to pump out really interesting research. We're going to get an update from him. He has a BS in pre-health professional sciences from Honors College in December 2020. His education at the University of Michigan School of Public Health. We got a master's in public health, specializing in epidemiology. He has contributed to 16 scientific manuscripts, advancing our understanding of COVID-19 vaccine. And then we are going to speak to Chris Fenton, who wrote a book about China. It's called Feeding the Dragon. He's been heading a company, DMG Entertainment Motion Picture Group, and that Feeding the Dragon is about the trillion-dollar dilemma facing Hollywood, the NBA, and American business as it pertains to China and tariffs. We'll get into all of that right after this.
Our laws as it pertains to substances are draconian and bizarre. The psychopaths start this way. He was an alcoholic because of social media and pornography, PTSD, love addiction, fentanyl and heroin. Ridiculous.
I'm a doctor, for Christ's sake. Where the hell do you think I learned that?
I'm just saying, you go to treatment before you kill people. I am a clinician. I observe things about these chemicals. Let's just deal with what's real.
We used to get these calls on Loveline all the time.
Educate adolescents and to prevent and to treat. If you have trouble you can't stop and you want to help stop it, I can help. I got a lot to say. I got a lot more to say.
I recently learned about a great product line formulated using a novel scientific breakthrough. It is called Active Skin Repair, and my whole family uses it and loves it, including our new granddaughter. Actually, her parents were using it for diaper rash and other skin irritations before we learned about it. It's a baby-strength spray made from naturally occurring molecule called HOCl.
The technology was just kind of really mind-blowing to me on how simple but how effective it was.
HOCl is a non-toxic, clinically proven antimicrobial molecule, been used in hospital for a long time, and it's actually produced by our own immune system. The applications are numerous: wound healing, insect bites, even eczema, rosacea, other inflammatory skin conditions.
What's really cool about it is, again, no toxicity. So you're not using any harsh antiseptics. It's non-cytotoxic. So when you're putting it on, you're killing the bacteria, but you're not hurting any of those healthy cells that your body's producing to actually help heal itself.
Active Skin Repair Spray also comes in a kid versus an adult version. Get yours at drdrew.com/skin repair for 20% off. That again is drdrew.com/skin repair for a 20% discount. As I said, we are here in studios in Florida. Elijah Schaefer has very graciously allowed us to take over once again. I'll be on his podcast, Almost Serious. Look for that. I'm not sure when it's going up, but I'm going to spend some time with him immediately following this show. But I don't think it's a stream. I think you have to look for it at Almost Serious, where you get your podcast, wherever that is. So let's get to Nick Hulscher. Let's get an update on what he's been discovering and pushing out over there at the McCullough Foundation. Nick, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me.
So a lot of vaccine data coming in from you. So bring us up to date. Which I saw some stuff even coming out today and yesterday. What has your attention right now?
Well, the most recent study that just came out actually shows that children, so they actually took 100,000 teens ages 12 to 17 or 12 to 18, and they compared it to 20,000.
I'm gonna have a bunch of questions. So don't permit me. I'm sorry. There's a little delay, so I'm gonna look like I'm interrupting Nick. I am because of this delay. Who are they? Who did this study, and how did they do it?
Yeah. So this study was based in Denmark. And so they compared 100,000 vaccinated teens to about 20,000 unvaccinated teens who were served as controls. And they found after 50 days, so 50 days after the second dose, up to 150 days after the second dose, the vaccinated teens that were vaccinated with Pfizer mRNA shots had 20% more emergency room visits and 17% more general practitioner visits. And so they didn't expand on what they went to the doctors or the emergency rooms for, but we can assume based on the data that has been published previously, this is likely due to what we call long vaccine. It's not long COVID, but it's very similar. It's probably due to this retained spike protein that they're unfortunately producing in their vital organ systems. And so they have to go to the doctors and they have these concerns. And that's probably why we see this 20% uptick in these ER visits among these teens. And this is one of the only studies that looks at teenagers with regards to safety concerns. Usually they only look at older people or middle-aged people. And so this is an absolutely critical study. And so if we want to get away from the chronic disease epidemic, if we want to start to reverse it, where over 60% of Americans have at least one chronic disease, we should probably stop giving chronic disease-inducing injections.
Yeah, we're going to speak, I think, tomorrow to Ram Yogendra, who's doing published some great studies now, finally published. They had trouble getting it published, of course, on long COVID and long vax. And I'll clarify this with him tomorrow, but my understanding is they're seeing a little more long vax than long COVID, and the long vax is more disabling and more chronic, more persistent.
Yeah, we could say that because unfortunately, a study recently came out. The first author was Ota. Was out of Japan, and they actually looked in stroke patients who got an mRNA shot, and they actually found their cerebral arteries, so their brain arteries, were actually producing the spike protein years after vaccination. And that was accompanied by immune system CD4 and CD8 cells, which indicates that the body was attacking its own brain as a result of this vaccine spike production. And so, unfortunately, with the vaccines, we do believe that the spike does last longer. It's not the same spike protein that's with the virus. So when the virus goes in, it attaches to the ACE2 receptor of your cells, but it kind of breaks in half when the viron enters the cell. With the vaccines, the mRNA goes into your cell and actually instructs your cells to produce a full-length spike protein that's been modified to be this full length and to be very stable. And so it's a different protein, full length, it's been modified, and we think it's more pathogenic than the viral version.
And I think Dr. Yogendra tomorrow going to tell us about these non-classical monocytes that continue to have intracytoplasmic components, or actually full spike proteins that prevent them from going through their normal apoptotic cycle and therefore sit there and inflame the brain.
Yes, and this is what appears to be happening, but unfortunately, it's not only the brain. And I want to go over two massive studies that kind of just throw the whole safe and effective narrative out of the water. So the two largest COVID vaccine safety studies ever conducted. The first one's by Fuxova and colleagues. This had 99 million people in it. They found 500% increased risks of myocarditis, 300% increased risks of spinal cord inflammation, which can be permanently disabling. It can cause paralysis, and about 200.
It was transverse myelitis?
Yes, transverse myelitis.
Yeah.
And so we have all these things. Yeah. And then we have the second largest vaccine safety study ever conducted, which was published a few weeks ago. That had 85 million people in it and had a control group. So it was about 40 million vaccinated, 40 million weren't. It was a meta-analysis. They found 300% increased risks of heart attack. They found 200% increased risks of arrhythmias. They found about 250% increased risks of stroke. And so now we have the largest population sizes ever studied that were vaccinated, and we find these massive risks.
Mm-hmm. I saw also you put something out about Alzheimer's.
Yes. There was a study by, I believe the first author is Roh, R-O-H. I could be wrong on that, but what he found, this was in Korea. They looked at about 100,000, actually a few 100,000 Koreans. They looked in the national database. They found about a 22.5% increase in Alzheimer's in the vaccinated older adult population. And so, again, this is probably due to this brain spike production. It's probably due to this brain inflammation that is causing brain damage. and resulting in this cognitive impairment, which they also looked at. They found cognitive impairment up about 140% in vaccinated older adults.
So it seems like the world's medical research sort of engine is changing gears, let's say. It's sort of kicking into gear where it's showing a willingness to look at these things. Answer me these two questions. It looks like it's distributed across the globe. And so my question is there a center of gravity from which this is coming from, as often there is in research? And number two, are these predominantly meta-analyses? These are big numbers.
Yeah, well, we'll start first. These are predominantly meta-analyses. So I'll say first, the largest study with 99 million people, that was not a meta-analysis. They just had a large database they collected these from. But the second largest one with 85 million people, this was a meta-analysis. But regardless, it's still valid. It's still valid sample sizes according to these epidemiologic principles. So, it's still great evidence. But regarding where we think most of the vaccine injuries are located, probably where the highest uptake is. It's really hard to gauge this because it hasn't been studied. But honestly, we could assume that the U.S. actually has some of the highest vaccine injury rates. Just by looking at the vaccine adverse events reporting system, we see about 40,000 deaths, over 1 million injuries. And that's underreported by a conservative estimate of about 31. So, we could have 30 million adverse events among Americans after these shots. And so, and we did have a massive uptake of these, but we also look in Europe. Europe had a large uptake of mRNA shots. And so it's really concentrated in the Western world. We look at Russia, China, they didn't really give mRNA shots to their populations. So that we would expect to see less mRNA-induced injuries there.
Yeah, I'm hoping that's just we're more hysterical, but we'll see. And certainly the West is more exposed, that's for sure. When I was saying center of gravity, I didn't mean center of gravity of incidence. I mean center of gravity of where the literature, where the research is coming from. You know how sometimes center of gravity comes to the U.S., sometimes it heads towards England, sometimes it goes to China. That's just sort of the way medical research works, or sometimes it's actually in Denmark. So my question is, and I'm going to add a question to this one too, and I'm trying to ask multiple questions again because of this whole delay we have. Has the center of gravity of research shifted, or where is it coming from? And is anybody attempting to get these meta-analysis up to a Cochrane standard and co-signed by Cochrane Group?
Well, that's what we need. We need these. We need a Cochrane review of these. We do know that's the gold standard, and as far as I'm aware, they haven't tried it. But out of America, we don't see many of these safety studies. Usually they are coming from either these European countries, or even Africa. There was actually a study that just came out of Africa. I believe Nigerian researchers, they looked at the COVID deaths before and after the vaccination campaign, and they found that the deaths, COVID-19 deaths across the world continued to increase despite mass vaccination, and in some areas actually drastically accelerated after the vaccination campaign, which was in the Western Pacific region. This is Australia, New Zealand. And so they saw about a 1,200% increase in COVID-19 deaths after the mass vaccination campaign. But another study that also came out recently was that about half of COVID-19 deaths in Greece were not actually due to COVID-19. They did a hospital audit. They verified the records. They looked and see, did these people at these hospitals actually die from COVID-19? And literally half of them did not. They just had a positive PCR test. And so we do think that this is reflective across the world. So death counts were drastically inflated for COVID-19.
So I have one question about the vaccine distribution, and then I want to talk about the sort of misrepresentation of epidemiology and data that is persisting out there. My first question, though, is I think Covaxin should have been deployed more, and that, my understanding, was deployed in India. Do we have data out of India in terms of their injury rate from the vaccines?
We don't have much. Yeah, I know they did deploy these inactivated virus ones. They deployed the antigen-based ones. And as far as I'm aware, it does have a less adverse event rate for sure than these mRNA shots. You can still get adverse events, obviously, by injecting spike. But what we really needed was nucleocapsid based. I mean, why did they go with the spike, the most pathogenic part?
Why? Well, but I get in the emergency when they didn't know how far this thing was going to go, they went for spike. I get it. But then why immediately didn't they switch to nucleocapsid when it was clear that the spike is the pathogenic mechanism? And then in the face of not doing that, persisting with the mandates. This is the insanity I hope that history will record.
It's absolutely insane. Literally, we now have about over 320 studies that show the spike protein alone is highly pathogenic. We have a research library published on this, and so we know it's dangerous to every single organ system. It shouldn't be in any of the products anymore. They got to wipe it out of any injectable. It doesn't belong in there. They can think of something better.
And so my other question is about data. And I'm trying to understand how we can help people come to terms with what we did here. So I noticed this week there was some data that came out about the adverse impact on kids of having school closure, which was freaking predictable. It was like, as soon as they kept doing it, I mean, when we were 2 months into it, and I always tell everyone the same story back then, you'll find me saying it almost in every stream, which was when the women and children were streaming out of the Ukraine in the first weeks of the Russian invasion, they were at the Polish border with Poland, putting mics in these women's face, and they all said the same thing. It's terrible. Our sons and husbands are having to stay back, fight this thing. But the kids have been out of school for 2 weeks. It's been 2 weeks. We have to get them back to school. 2 weeks. We did 2 years. And that's insane that we would think that wouldn't have an adverse impact on kids on multiple levels, developmentally, socially, emotionally, cognitively, all of it. I mean, it's just disgusting. So my question is, that's not my question. My question is, we now have sort of agreement that it went too long and it had adverse impact. And I still have people saying, I noticed it on social media, yeah, but the teachers need to be protected. It wasn't about protecting the kids. The teachers needed protection. How do we help people understand that once the pandemic passed, it really, at 6 months, it was sort of wrapped. I mean, they were still around, and still old people needed to be cared, and we needed to be, there was things for us to do as doctors. But in terms of society closing down, unnecessary and damaging. And this didn't, to protect the teachers, open the windows. That's it. Just open your windows. Is there anything more we should have done for teachers? Masking, add anything more to open windows? Keeping kids home, add anything more to those teachers' safety? No, I would say not. What do you say? And where do we find that data?
Yeah, these lockdowns were the stupidest and most damaging idea they could have ever done. So they locked everybody down, right? Nobody went to school, like you just said. But this has resulted in America's now largest depression rates. Now everybody's depressed, suicide rates are up, and all these things are up. So the mental health has deteriorated among the American population. It's just terrible. And, unfortunately, these lockdowns were based on flawed modeling. They tried to say it was going to kill so many millions.
But how do we respond to these people that keep going? Yeah, but the teachers needed protection. How do we get them to understand that surgical masks don't work? Locking schools down was not necessary. Kids didn't transmit COVID. Kids transmit flu. They don't transmit COVID. And how do we fight back so people can start to look at what happened realistically?
Yeah, I mean, there is a Cochrane review actually that found these cloth masks literally do absolutely nothing. I mean, they don't reduce respiratory virus transmission at all. So this masking was nonsense. Now, regarding protecting the teachers, I mean, why don't we tell them to raise their vitamin D levels? Vast majority of Americans have
nasal lavage.
Yeah,
nasal lavage would have done more than any of this stuff, right?
Right. Iodine-based nasal lavages, gargles, all these things, early treatments, and all like preventative measures, these nutraceuticals, vitamin C. If you're not eating fruits, take some vitamin C, these basic things that were just completely neglected that would offer far more protection than a cloth mask that acts like a chain link fence.
Yeah. So everything we did, there was no reason for gloves. There was no reason for plexiglass sheets that actually only decrease the circulation that should have been increased to keep the virus out, or at least from landing somewhere. Nasal lavage, and even saline nasal lavage. I know that we were working on a betadine lavage early in this thing. We were representing one here, and we were crushed for it. How dare you?
Well, they went out of business.
They went out of business.
Which
That's
was
right.
BS. They should have been making more money than
They
anybody.
should have been the vaccine. They should have been what people were doing. And even now, you can prevent respiratory viral illness by nasal lavage a couple times a day. And saline is adequate. There's other lavages out there that are probably a little better, but saline is adequate if that's what you want to do. And I agree with you, the betadine is better. But there's still like a mass delusion. There's mass formation is still flying around. Do you ever think about that and how we can sort of break through with more reality and more data?
Yeah, so I think, well, obviously we know the new HHS, they're going to be pouring out loads of studies that are probably going to, put this to bed. But there will still be about 20% of the population that is holding on to this pandemic era nonsensical principles. They're still in this mass psychosis. They're still taking upwards now of 9 mRNA booster injections. So I think to get to these people, we kind of have to reach the mainstream media that has not reported on any of this, absolutely any of this. And so,
they haven't.
They haven't. It's dangerous.
It gives us a
to
purpose.
The population.
Yeah, it gives us a reason. I think you will one day, here's my prediction, you will one day hear them going, much the way they're congratulating themselves for recognizing now that President Biden was in decline, they will go, yeah, I guess we kind of missed it. We didn't really realize that when they say that, I get so angry when I hear them talk about, well, it's the people at the White House to blame. They didn't give us the information. Your job is to find the information. You're supposed to be reporting, reporters. That's supposed to be your job. And guess what you did do? You canceled and censored anybody who said anything different. I was talking about poor President Biden's Parkinsonism for 3 years. They still aren't talking about it. And by the way, they're so screwed up. I'm sorry to switch topics here, but we don't even know if it was the Parkinsonian medication that made him so sleepy and so cognitively impaired. He may not have dementia. He may just have advanced Parkinsonism due to I don't know what, but they didn't give any of it. So who knows? And so and if he deteriorates, we know what it is. But anyway, I digress. We have about 4 or 5 minutes to wrap up. Nick, what do you have on your radar going forward?
Yeah, right now we see these threats being made by people like Peter Marks, who was just ousted from the FDA. He's saying all of a sudden there's going to be these engineered pathogen threats. So they're saying Ashish Jha, former COVID czar, a few months ago said we're entering an age of bioweapons. Bill Gates has consistently warned of bioweapon attacks. And so, when these people that are advocates of gain-of-function research, we have to be on the lookout. There's about over 1,000 BSL-3 and BSL-4 biolabs in the United States alone. And many of these are conducting this gain-of-function research, modifying pathogens to become more dangerous, more deadly, and more transmissible to humans. This is something that needs to be shut down. We cannot have another man-made pandemic. We now know that the White House just confirmed what we've known for years, that SARS-CoV-2 did leak out of the Wuhan lab. So we have to now take preemptive measures. We got to stop this research, and we got to protect the population from these man-made threats that shouldn't even be in existence.
Yep, I completely agree with you. And just reasoning through this bioweapon risk, I mean, I'm sure there's all kinds of crazy stuff going on, but why would China want to destroy its primary consumer market? Why would they? Maybe the tariffs will make it a moot point and they'll just want our natural resources. But they want us vassal. They don't want us dead, seems to me. And that's what we should be fighting. That's the war we should be fighting, is autonomy and maybe not being such rapacious consumers. And rather than creating rapacious viruses or rapacious vaccines to fight off rapacious viruses. I'm going too far with the metaphor. So, Nick, do you have some research coming? Is there something specific? Because I want to make sure I'm on top of your research as it comes out. Anything on the printing press?
Yeah, we're working on a lot of studies, a lot of case reports. We found spike in somebody 2.5 years after mRNA vaccination. So we have some of these coming out. We have some excess mortality papers coming out. We identified large increases in deaths after vaccination. So a lot up the pipeline at the McCullough Foundation here. We're now over our 20th study looking at the harms of these shots, and we will continue to do so until the government finally does something about it. Because unfortunately, our government did not look for any treatments for the vaccine injured. They have been ignored. There are millions of them, millions of vaccine injured Americans. And so we have to start helping these people out. I don't know how many people, if you go ask any of your friends or family, usually somebody knows somebody that has either died or been permanently disabled.
I've got patience. And it's really very striking when you see it. It's not a rare thing.
Horrible.
It's uncommon, but it happens, and it happens way more than it needed to. I would just say, you saw the DOJ is going to go after the journals now. It's something that RFK had promised in his presidential run. And the goal of that DOJ dismantling of the, what's another word for RICO? Anyway, it's a organized operation. The goal is not just to harm the journals, but to get them to publish data like this that runs a little contrary to their dogmas, because that's when you know science isn't getting done. Science is never just saith the Lord. It's never just one way. It's a back and forth. It's a back and forth until a consensus emerges, and a consensus isn't given. It emerges over time in a scientific discourse. Nick, I appreciate you being here. Where should people go to find you?
Yes, you can follow me on X at NIC Hulscher. And I want to thank you so much for having me on your show.
It's always good to have you. We'll have you back soon.
Thank you.